Minnesota Vikings have been around since 1961. And we just want them to win a damn Super Bowl before we die. Welcome to Before We Die with Jesse and Thor on Purple Daily and Score North.
What's going on, everybody? This is Before We Die on Purple Daily and Score North, your Tuesday edition, replacing your Monday edition because there was a Monday night football game for your Minnesota Vikings. I'm Jesse Pierce. He's Thor. He's Ross. What's going on, everybody? Let's recap because we have to, because that's what we've dedicated ourselves to doing. We have to recap the Monday night football game in Philadelphia where Minnesota looked just not good. That's a nice way of putting it. Last week, we had the Vikings winning the Super Bowl with a big victory over Green Bay. This week, you don't think they're going to win another game. That's what happens. You know, week 1 to week 2. I think the Vikings are somewhere in between. But again, terrible showing at the Link in Philadelphia, guys. There's so much to digest here. Where do we even want to start, Thor? Should we start with PRIMETIME KIRK?
Well, on last week's show, I said if KIRK has a bad outing, that we shouldn't drum on the PRIMETIME KIRK thing. But man, was that a bad performance? It was one of the worst games of his entire career. Like even going outside of the primetime game thing. And I read somewhere that he's now 2-10 against the spread on Monday Night Football, which is the worst against the spread record of a quarterback for the last 20 years. It's worth noting, but does it have an extreme amount of predictive value going forward? Like for the next Monday night game, it's certainly going to be brought up again, but I don't think we should just assume that in every Monday night game, he's going to be bad, but he absolutely was last night.
But that seems to be, it is 2-10 is not good. Would you not argue? Like it is not good. He is, I think I saw a stat, it was either 66 and 66 or 60 and 60 somewhere where it just proves he is the most mediocre quarterback of all mediocre quarterbacks, right? Yeah. That's very mediocre. That's not great. That's just meh. He went 27 of 46 for 221 yards and 1 touchdown. But the worst part of that all, guys, 3 interceptions, 2 from Darius Slade. I think the biggest problem there too is 2 of those interceptions coming in the red zone. I mean, KIRK was just heaving it up there. Darius Slade knew what to do. Great coverage on Justin Jefferson. Can we put all of the blame on KIRK in his kind of panic situations? Because we also got to look at some of the drop balls. There were several instances, including Irv Smith Jr., who could have had a shoe-in touchdown, which probably would have changed the game dramatically on 2nd and 10. Are we blaming more of KIRK for that, or blaming the receivers, or a combination of the scheme?
Yeah, no, it's definitely not all on KIRK. Last week when we were talking about the Packers game, there was almost too many good things for us to be able to touch on going to each individual one. This week is the exact opposite, where there's almost too many people to blame to get into every single one. Did KIRK play bad? Yeah, he did. The accuracy was not good. The decision-making wasn't good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, on one of the interceptions, Jefferson ran the wrong concept. Mm-hmm. I mean, number one, you had all the drops like you mentioned. Irv Smith, a free touchdown just dropped off the guy's hands. And it wasn't just Irv, but Irv had a bad night. There were multiple other drops. The routes and the scheme and everything, it was just all off. Whereas the week before against the Packers, you were using Jefferson like we had always wanted to see him, motion him around, get him in mismatches, stuff like this. Now you were facing a better cornerback, one in Slay, but you mostly just kept Jefferson out there. There was a little bit of motion, little bit, but it wasn't even close to what we had seen in the last game. O'Connell put this loss on himself after the game. He deserves a big part of the blame. I think Ed Donatel deserves quite a bit of blame. The offense, I didn't know what the offense was, why they weren't doing the stuff that they had done in the previous game. But then on defense, I don't know what they were doing at all. Like the treetop strategy, it didn't even make sense. Like they were playing 2 deep safeties the entire game. And I get that you're a little bit afraid of the Eagles receiving core, but Jalen Hurts is not known for his arm strength and hitting guys downfield. So to facilitate, I mean, what you did by keeping the guys back, you opened up all this stuff underneath. You also never had a spy on Jalen Hurts. Mm-hmm. So when Jalen Hurts broke contain, he was a free 10 yards or whatever every single time. It was just a really weird defensive strategy going up against this team, and the offense was all over the place. I don't know what they were doing there either.
I think Kirk Cousins' play last night doesn't surprise me because sadly we've seen that before in those moments. Maybe it was worse than I expected, but that doesn't surprise me at all. The Vikings defensive play in the first half, again, not really super surprising because I think there's still a learning curve for a lot of us here with the new schemes, new coordinators. I get that. But what bugged me is the seemingly lack of making adjustments throughout the game or moving that coverage up. And they did have some sacks last night. They did have some pressure on Jalen Hurts, but not enough. There was plenty of time where he could stand back there all night long. I guess I'm more upset about two things. I'll leave the KIRK stuff in a separate bucket. I'm more upset about the lack of adjustments and just how soft the defense came out. They weren't matching Philadelphia at all physically. I don't like using the term embarrassing because I don't play for the team, but that Jalen Hurts touchdown run was borderline embarrassing. That can't happen. You had him stopped a few different times and he winds up in the end zone. I was very off-put by the defense last night. The offense, I trust KOC. I think he'll figure it out enough. We know that you're going to get good KIRK more than bad KIRK. It's frustrating because I'd hope that they'd maybe coach some of that out of KIRK, but I'm more annoyed by the defensive play and just the lack of physicality than anything.
I'd agree, and we'll dive a little bit more into the defense, the shell defense to start off, which was a complete failure, especially in that first half. But I want to focus a little bit more on the offense again in our They Said It. As we'd mentioned, Kevin O'Connell taking the brunt of the blame. He was quoted as saying post-game, "I have to do a better job and make sure we stay true to what we are and what we want to be offensively." Adam Thielen added on, "Last week, we did the things we've talked about since OTAs. Tonight, we didn't do the things we've talked about since OTAs." Vikings head coach Kevin O'Connell had a great point about diffusing that momentum when it was swayed. We didn't do that tonight, and it was obviously crucial. I mean, that goes to your point that you just mentioned, Ross. There was no adjustment. There was no kind of going back at Philadelphia and countering what they were able to do. And again, a lot of it with Darius Slay, proving that Justin Jefferson can be shut down under Slay alone after having a career high week against the Packers. Justin Jefferson only had 5 catches for 43 yards on 11 targets with Slay coverage, 48 total yards on 6 catches for JJ. An Eagles defensive back, Zeke McPherson, said he put one of the best receivers in the league in a car seat. That's the truth. We feed off him for real. Seen him make so many plays, lead the defense, and back his talk up on the field. You have no choice but to get behind your brother, and that's him on Slay. I mean, does this change your guys' opinion? Again, Vikings were going to the Super Bowl. Justin Jefferson was the best receiver in the NFL in week 1. Now, what do we think? Is Justin Jefferson still have the potential to be the number 1 receiver in the league, or did we see something different? Again, we go back to his missed route, and, he took accountability for that, which I think speaks volumes of him as a player. But does this change your perception of where JJ's at this season, or are we looking at it as, again, it's one game, it'll be all right?
Absolutely not. Justin Jefferson is the best receiver in football, but last night, it didn't go well. But again, you have to decide where you're going to put the blame on. Cousins had the awful game. Jefferson seemed extremely frustrated by a couple of things, both the extra attention he was getting from Philly, which you saw really early. It wasn't just the one guy running with him who was ever matched up against him, but they always had help over the top on him. So Jefferson was basically double teamed every single time. But then I'm sure Justin Jefferson was wondering, why aren't you motioning me more to try to get me more into advantageous situations? Mm-hmm. It was almost like the Vikings had decided in advance. Well, last week the Eagles saw us just slap around with the Packers with Justin Jefferson, do whatever we wanted. So this time we're going to sort of play against that and try to go to some of the other guys when the Eagles we know are going to give extra attention to Justin Jefferson. And they did, but it's just that whether it was the scheme, whether it was Cousins, they were not on the same page with the other receivers. There was all the drops like we were mentioning. And then Justin Jefferson, his head seemed to go out of the game a little bit. Where, this was sort of like college football. You go to week 1 when LSU played Florida State. One of the best receivers in college football is this kid named Keishawn Butte. He got extremely frustrated during that game because they couldn't get him the ball. Florida State was doing coverage stuff, and then LSU's quarterback is accuracy averse. And Butte started to round off some of his routes. He didn't get his hands up quick enough when the ball was on him. It wasn't quite as bad with Jefferson last night, but that was the frustrating aspect of it, where it didn't seem like on every single rep you were getting 100% focus and 100% effort. But I do think a lot of it is circumstantial. When the offensive scheme is humming like it was in week 1, you're always going to get that from Jefferson. And when you're not against Darius Slay, you're always going to get that from Jefferson. This will open up the ability for KOC to make some adjustments. And I think long-term, that's the positive thing. He was looking himself in the mirror talking to the media last night. Mm-hmm. He is going to come in with more fleshed out game plans going forward. This was only his second game, but I think it speaks to the inexperience there, the inexperience with Donatel. Justin Jefferson's only 23 years old. So, it's like Mama said, there will be days like this. This was a bad game, but, I think that there were things that the Vikings can learn where they can correct some of this stuff going forward.
I think it underscores, too, how difficult it can be on a first-year coach in the NFL. It doesn't matter how much experience you have as a coordinator or a position coach. When you're the guy, things speed up an awful lot, and I think we saw some of that with KOC last night. We saw that with some of the first-year head coaches over the weekend. We've seen it with Nathaniel Can't Hack It 2 weeks in a row. So I think that's one thing that I think about when you're trying to play out this entire season. What does it look like? I've always said I think the Vikings are a playoff team, but how deep can they go and how many regular season wins can they have? Last night gives me a little bit of pause that it'll be closer to the 9-10 number than maybe the 12 or 13 number. But again, I don't really want to evaluate much until we get through 4 or 5 games here in the regular season, because I think that it's just really tough to know what do the Vikings have, but I think it's really tough to know what the rest of the league has. And we'll get into it later this week, probably on Thursday. I'm really intrigued by the Vikings and Lions game. And one quick teaser, mainly because the Lions have a great offensive line. The Eagles also have a great offensive line, and it'll be interesting to see how the Vikings deal with that, albeit at home, what that looks like this upcoming weekend.
Is the world ready for like a potential Buffalo Philadelphia Super Bowl? Like, do you think we could anybody could handle that? Like, that sounds like chaotic, but Buffalo's really good too. And Philadelphia, again, not just against the Vikings, but I think are a very good football team. Jalen Hurts, very good quarterback and developing into a very good quarterback. Speaking of him, he completed 26 of 31 passes for 333 yards and 3 touchdowns. The first half is where things really immediately fell apart for Minnesota, right, guys? We had talked about the defense feeling just very unprepared. They started with the shell defense that could not stop Hurts, who completed his first 9 passes and had 251 passing yards in the first half alone. Blown coverage from Cam Bynum. Cam Dantzler was benched in the third for a Caleb Evans. I mean, it seemed like there were minor little tweaks here, but as we'd mentioned with Cam Bynum out, you only saw Lewis Cine take one go at it. So, I mean, do you think that there needs to be, again, what does KOC and what does, the defense, what do they need to do to answer and respond better, especially moving forward in the next few weeks?
Well, yeah, that was it's really unfortunate when you have the stupid defensive strategy coming in and keeping the 2 guys deep, and all you got to do is pass the receiver off when he goes deep. You can't allow him to get past you if you're the deep safety on that side. And Cam Bynum just watched Watkins just run right by him. He bit up on the other guy, was running that other route. It was
Goddard, which killed me because that was the reason I lost my fantasy this week. Thank you very much. And that and Derrick Henry, I think I'm done with him. I am over him. I'm done with it. But Dallas Goedert had to get 5 catches and 82 yards.
Obligatory fantasy football
I'm happy you lost your game, Jesse.
I'm still gonna win. I'm still gonna win the championship. I'm just saying.
Yeah, well, but this is the crap we were doing to the Packers the week before, and the Vikings offense is going to do this to more teams where they sort of coax out the mental breaks on the back end by giving the defensive backs like so many problems to solve. But what was even more frustrating about it from a Vikings perspective is Cam Bynum, the thing he got dinged for coming out, it's his athletic ability. So if it's a foot race between him and Quez Watkins, he's going to lose every single time. But his best thing is decision-making on the field. It's the football IQ. It's the reason that he's playing above Louis Cine. So to have that sort of breakdown again, especially when the entire strategy was to take away that one specific play. They couldn't take away the stuff that the defense was supposed to be taken away. And then they couldn't even take away the deep stuff either. Was super duper frustrating. And then as far as the Louis Cine thing, we ought to get into it. Cam Bynum did not have a good game yesterday. And Louis Cine was still on a milk carton for the whole game. Where Vikings Twitter was like, where's Louis Cine? Where's Louis Cine? And, we had sort of joked the week before that it seemed like the Vikings might be exaggerating the the ailment that he had suffered supposedly in practice to make him a non-healthy scratch as opposed to a healthy scratch. This game, he basically was a healthy scratch. Even though you're getting your butt kicked, the game was over, at some point during the third quarter. You would think that would be a great opportunity to get Louis Cine some playing time, especially when the guy who is ahead of him is struggling during that game. But they didn't. Louis Cine got on the field literally for one snap, and it was probably just so afterwards they didn't have to answer questions of why didn't Louis Cine play. It's starting to get a little weird that Cine is not on the field more than he is.
I just need to give you a clap for that milk carton reference. That was brilliant. That's good. I won't compliment you much because I got to keep you in check, but
I'll take everyone I get from you, Jesse.
I envision what is that, Terminator? Have you seen this boy? That's all I envision of when I think of where's Louis Cine.
How could he have been worse than Bynum last night? My question.
Yeah.
I don't know if he could have been. And I think that's what a lot of people have talked about. If eventually Cine is just going to start in place of Bynum, then why doesn't he just start the year? Mm-hmm. And if he's not ready to start the year, albeit a late round pick in the first round, then maybe that shouldn't have been the guy you used with that pick if it's going to take you, a quarter of a season, half a season to get him on the field. I'm not ready to sound the alarm there, but it is interesting. I know he was injured, but it is interesting that he's not seeing the field more. I want to pose a question to both of you. This threw me for a loop last night. In the first half on 3rd and 2, the Vikings go empty backfield and they throw an incomplete pass and have to punt. I don't hate empty backfield. I think it's great when you're a team like the Vikings and you have a fair amount of weapons on offense. I don't love it on 3rd down. Put Dalvin Cook in the backfield. Let teams think you might be running. Mm-hmm. If they're all wide and Dalvin Cook is split out wide, all it could be is either a pass or a Kirk Cousins scramble, and it more than likely isn't going to be that. I just want to get your guys' thoughts on that. I think when you're in 3rd and short, I think you have to put Dalvin Cook in the backfield just for the perceived threat you might hand the ball off to him. I get it. Last night was a tough night on the ground, but I still think you have to do it.
Yeah, I mean, overall, I would agree with that thought for sure. Mm-hmm. One thing it evokes is like LSU 2019 when they had like Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson and Chase, and in the backfield with Burrow, they had Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They would do the thing on 3rd and short sometimes where they would line up the 4 wide, or I suppose Thaddeus Moss, Randy's kid, would be one of them, the tight end. But you'd have Edwards-Helaire in the backfield, and then right before the snap, you'd motion him out into the slot, and you could essentially get the defense to tip off its intentions to you about how it's going to defend and cover. Empty in terms like that, where you're getting some information in getting to empty. I think you could, argue for that. But the straightforward thing, I agree with you. You take out the threat of the run. And going back to the motion thing, we saw how devastating it was to the Packers, all the different motion that the Vikings were doing. And Kevin O'Connell had said something really interesting after the game. I think it was Kevin O'Connell who said this, but about how motioning Jefferson, it's not just that it gets him into more advantageous situations against the coverage. It's also that it forces the defense to basically give out its intentions before the play is started, how they intend to cover the play or defend the play. You get to find out whether they're in man, whether they're in zone, who's going to be on what side, everything like that. You give a whole bunch of the answers. And there was just a dearth of that in this game, which the more answers that you could give Kirk Cousins pre-snap, the better Kirk Cousins is going to play. And you basically remove that from your own playbook, which I thought was weird. But yeah, Ross, I agree with your point overall.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to repeat, but I think in general, and we talked about this even against Green Bay, and I understand, I think Kevin O'Connell's looking at it as trying to keep Dalvin Cook healthy as best he can and trying to split that with Madison. I still want to see a little bit more of Dalvin. I think they don't utilize him. They haven't the past 2 weeks like they should. I mean, again, yes, you have some of the best receivers, Justin Jefferson, namely, but I mean, Adam Thielen, you're throwing the ball. That's great. But there's nothing wrong with that run game and utilizing, or at least the threat of utilizing Dalvin Cook, because he's obviously, as we all know, a very capable back when healthy as he is right now.
Yeah, it was way too easy for the Eagles to erase them. And look, I mean, the game script got away from the Vikings early. This was basically the exact, the Vikings this time played the Packer role, where the Vikings had gotten way ahead of the Packers in the first game. So the second half, the game script was totally different for both teams than they thought.
Literally with the drop pass even, right?
Wow.
Like literally.
Yeah.
I mean,
Irv Smith playing the role of Christian Watson this time.
Yes.
But it seemed like the Vikings, they still wanted to keep Dalvin Cook in the game by running these screens.
Mm-hmm.
The Eagles were all over those friggin' screens. Every single time they threw a screen, it was almost intercepted. Yeah. Like, they got to figure out something else with the screen game. I agree with your point overall that they need to get Dalvin involved. Regardless, in this game, I'm not going to argue against how many times the ball was thrown because that's what the game script dictated. But you have to get Dalvin involved as a receiver. But again, whether it was play design or what, they were giving off some sort of intention to the Eagles where the Eagles back half was sniffing that out every single time. There wasn't any clean screen passes to be had. I would like to see Dalvin used a little bit more. Going back to the 2019 LSU team, I would like to see Dalvin motioned out more, used in the slot. If that's what, the game script is going that way, you're going to start throwing more. Start to do some interesting things with Dalvin too, with the motion and getting him out in space and running routes like a receiver, because he can do that as well.
Yeah. Well, that is a Rams staple with going back to Todd Gurley and Cam Akers. So maybe we'll see more of that as the season goes on. I do think a lot of this stuff, it takes time to unveil the entire playbook and for everybody to know it as well as they should. So again, that's why I keep saying, look, for as disappointing as last night was, I wanted the Vikings to go 1-1 in the first 2 weeks, and I was hopeful that they would beat Green Bay because a divisional opponent, it means slightly more. And I'll be honest, I kind of automatically assumed they would probably go to Philly and lose. I would have been very excited if they won. And I thought, look, that's a missed opportunity to get to 2-0 and really get people behind you. But all is not lost with how the season has started for the Minnesota Vikings.
However, Harrison Smith potentially lost. He left the game yesterday with a concussion. We'll see what happens. How good do you think it is that Minnesota has the quick turnaround going from Monday night to now playing Detroit? I mean, you get to kind of wash it away, right? Wash the bad taste out of your mouth, regroup, and head and host Detroit here, who is not a bad team, you guys. Like, nope. Detroit is no longer the team that you're going to come in and expect to just absolutely destroy. They're a very competent, very capable team. They believe in their coach. They believe in themselves this year. Do you feel like it is a must win, not only so the Vikings move up to 2-1, but to win against a division opponent? Do you think against the Lions, it's a must win for Minnesota now this week, having come off this tough loss in Philadelphia?
I wouldn't say must win, but they're going to win this game. I think they're going to mop the floor with the Lions.
Well, they have to stick with your 12 wins, Thor.
Well, yeah. By the way, I'm the only person on this panel who correctly predicted the outcomes of the first two games. And this third one, I'm taking the Vikings to win by double digits. In the same way the first game was.
Did we ever officially make predictions? I feel like
you said win or loss.
Yeah, we did. I predicted a loss in the last game.
But you didn't name the score.
No, I didn't name the score.
Maybe the producer of the show should remember such bits when they happen.
Pull the receipts. Pull the receipts.
Pull the receipts. Pull them. Pull them. Yeah.
All right, Robert Saleh.
Yeah, pull them. And I think the Vikings are going to win. Like I said, I think they're going to win this game handily. It's the last game was a really poor situational spot. That's what we talked about heading into that game. Everyone's pumping your tires during the week after you just slaughtered the Packers. Packers didn't have any tape on what you were doing. They hadn't even seen your starters during the preseason. So you get to ambush them. Plus, the Packers had durability questions. They had multiple guys out, Bears mentioning. And then the next game, you got to go into Philadelphia, a team that you don't match up particularly well against. It was sort of the opposite scenario. And the Eagles were coming off sort of a sluggish performance in week 1 against the Lions. They did end up winning, but it was just barely. It just set up for the Vikings to themselves get ambushed. This game, the Vikings, they match up much better against the Lions. The Lions' talent level isn't nearly what the Eagles is. And I think the Vikings have a legitimate home field advantage, like in comparison to the rest of the NFL. So, I mean, for all those different reasons, and just talking about it from a treetop perspective, yes, this sucks, what just happened. But the schedule going forward, it opens up quite a bit. If you were to rank heading into the season, the 5 hardest Vikings games, the first 2 objectively would have been in any top 5 list, right? I mean, you'd have to toss in the game at Green Bay, of course, might be number 1. And then at the Bills would be the other one. But you're struggling to find other games that you feel like are harder than the first 2. The Vikings have gotten, a big part of the hardest games out of the way already. And now looking forward, the Vikings already had 2 more home games this year than they had true road games, because they caught the schedule right, getting the 9 home games and then 8 away games. But one of those away games is the London game against the Saints. So I mean, and then also just the strength of the opponents is way less. Like the Vikings going forward, I think it's beneath 25th strength of schedule. Like, what they have left to play in the last 15 games. And then also, again, advantageous in terms of getting the way more true home games. So I think this is setting up well for the Vikings.
I don't like that you said handily. I completely disagree with that. I think you're wrong, like you are about the Hawkeyes and stuff. I mean, it's just, there's a list of wrong, Thor. Because, I mean, you go back to that week 1, they gave Philadelphia a run for money. They performed far better than Minnesota did against Philly. I mean, that was a close, 38-35 game. And then they went in and beat Washington. I mean, I think Detroit is going to be much better than people assume. I think they are. You're right. They're coming in huge underdogs still, because people still have the old Detroit regime kind of vibe and feeling about them. But I think they're just much improved. Yes, you still don't have a competent quarterback, in my opinion. But I think it's going to be a very close game. I think Minnesota will win. I do think home field advantage. I almost said home ice. Wow. Training camp opens this week, guys. But I do think home field advantage is especially true at US Bank Stadium. We talked about it in our lead up to the start of the season, how loud that place is, how great it is for Vikings fans and the Vikings team. But I think it's going to be much closer. I don't think it's going to be a double-digit win. I'm looking at a touchdown, maybe a field goal difference in this. And again, that's only if you get a far improved team than what you saw Monday night.
I don't care how it gets done. I just think for this team to get to where they want to go, they can't lose home games. At the end of the year, this team has to look back and say, we lost no more than a game at home. If they do that, that means the season has gone really well for the Minnesota Vikings. I'll push back on Thor a little bit. I'm the guy that never gets excited about schedules. I just don't for any team, because you don't know what they mean. I think we all would have looked at the Saints and even Miami at the beginning of the year and said, those are incredibly winnable games. Well, now you look at those games, both coming up, and I'd say they're probably both toss-ups.
Yeah, I mean,
Thor
true.
clearly disagrees. He's giving me the death stare if you're watching.
You're not a Tua fan? You're not a Tua fan?
Well,
two and on.
The Dolphins game may have moved into that top 5, like of that rankings of the hardest game, potentially. I wouldn't say I'm terribly afraid of the Saints game. Kamara's hurt right now. And then also, I believe Kamara, I looked this up yesterday. I hope I don't butcher this, but I think his court hearing is a couple days before that London game. And they're waiting on the suspension until that. So between the injury, between the potential suspension for Kamara, it seems like you would say the odds are that Kamara is not going to be playing in that game. The schedule is it's easier going forward. I mean, like circumstantially, this definitely matters, right? I mean, like it definitely does. And as far as matching up better against the Lions, I'll tell you why. The Packers have one of the worst receiving cores in the league. The Lions one ain't much better. They struggle getting separation. They basically, until Jameson Williams comes back, you basically have the one receiver in Amon-Ra St. Brown. The Eagles, their receiving core is one of the best in the league ever since they got A.J. Brown. And you got him and you got Devonta, et cetera. What's the Vikings' worst thing on defense? It's their coverage. So, I mean, if they're going up against teams that have the awesome receiving cores, that defense is going to play down for sure. And then the worst thing on offense so far is their pass blocking. The Lions, they have pieces because they added Hutchinson, stuff like that, but their pass rush isn't there yet. Like in terms of like the whole league right now, they're bottom 10 in that. So I don't think they can exploit what the Vikings' worst thing is on defense, and I don't think they can exploit what the Vikings' worst thing is on offense. And yes, the Lions give you a lot of effort, but I don't, they play hard for Campbell, et cetera. But I don't think of them as one of these schematic teams that's playing the 3D chess with you in the same way a team like the Eagles is, for instance, right? So schematically, I would definitely give the edge to the Viking side as well. I just think they match up way better. And this is a really good situational spot now where people are looking the other way and not believing in you as much.
Aiden Hutchinson 3 sacks last weekend, so be ready for him on Sunday.
He was one of my favorites in HBO's Hard Knocks. I'm not gonna lie, like his whole family seems like good people, very pretty people too, which was remarkable. I don't know have all of them in that gene pool, and I like their coach too. He reminds me a lot of the dude. So there we go. We'll.
He definitely, yeah, but he's like a way bigger, way more intense. I was around.
I think it's just
a little bit
he
at the combine, and it's
It's just because he says man.
Like
he says man like every 2 seconds. Well, I don't know, man.
He's like a gritty version of the Big Lebowski.
Yes, right.
But yeah, I mean, yes, and you have to account for Hutchinson, and I'm guessing that's what's going to be all the talk in the Vikings offensive meetings this week. But if you can I mean, this is a big F, but if you can neutralize Hutchinson, you neutralize their entire pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have a lot of it outside of that. They
hold
right
it for
now,
Thursday.
26th in PFF pass rush. What's that?
Hold it for Thursday. We need content for Thursday.
Leave them wanting more.
Yeah.
Leave them wanting
more. Join us
more.
Thursday for more of Thor's rants and rambles. You know,
I won't be in as bad of a mood on Thursday either. So, but I'll leave plenty in the chamber.
This is you in a bad mood. You're still smiling.
Well, I get to talk about the Vikings. It's another day above ground. But yeah, last night was not good. Me and my buddies went to the Moose. And in the second half, we were just like kicking under the table and grumbling under our breaths. And what is this guy doing? What's Donatel doing? What the hell was this game plan O'Connell came in with? Kirk Cousins would not want to have been a fly on the wall during that meeting either. Not nice things are being said about Kirk, but ready to turn the page for the Lions. And I think the Vikings match up well.
Does anybody do this? And I'm being sincere here because I watch a lot of football. Does any quarterback in college or NFL on the road do this more than Kirk Cousins? It seems like the guy can't hear. I get it's tough on the road. I get it. I don't think any other quarterback I've ever seen does this more than him. Can he not hear a dang thing in his headset?
No.
Did you guys ever watch that Austin Powers where they had the fembots?
Yeah.
And then like the fembot, like then it shorted out and the head popped off. That's like Kirk Cousins. When everything's going good with the system, he's a beautiful, beautiful person, beautiful player. But when it starts to short circuit for him, like clearly, like even by the second quarter, his head was just like smoke was coming out and everything like that. He was making all these weird decisions, like he was throwing behind guys. Just bad times.
Darius Slay is out there stripping down. Yeah, that's right. That's what happened.
He's good for like one of those duds per year. It happens like clockwork. I would be pretty confident in saying that's going to be his worst game of the season. If he has a worse one than that, I would be very surprised.
Well, we'll find out again. Obviously, Thursday we have another. I'm holding you guys back. We got to talk. We have another episode.
I'm just envisioning Kwesi or KOC walking into like the training room and going, "My goodness, Kirk, you're a fembot."
We just lost everybody under the age of like 25. Like, what are they even talking about? It was Austin Powers. Like, they have no clue at all.
Kids, you got to watch Austin Powers. You got to watch the classics.
And I know. I think they're mostly all available, or at least 2 of the 3 are on the Netflix machine right now. So get after it.
I was watching it at an age that was far too young to be watching it. Like my brother and I were. I was like, this seems inappropriate. Now that I look back on it. Anyway, we will have more Vikings talk, maybe more Austin Powers movie talk come Thursday on our next episode of Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. So tune in then as we start to preview a little bit deeper the Detroit Lions game on Sunday. Before we let you guys go, our Before We Dies, Ross, why don't you kick us off this week?
I think Before We Die, visibly behind Thor, I'll be able to see the University of Minnesota football helmet. That's what I'm hopeful for. I'll save my other one for Thursday, but I'd love to see that Golden Gopher football helmet in the camera view.
All right, Thor, what you got?
We'll have to make it swap for Ross. It's just a little bit higher, just a little bit outside of the view. I got Iowa and Minnesota going head to head up there.
I do like the UCLA hat. New member to the Big Ten. I like that. Right. Or helmet. I just called a helmet a hat. They're gonna come after me in the comments.
Yeah, my Before We Die. It's not a prediction. It's just something I want to happen. I want the Eagles in the playoffs. I want the Vikings and the Eagles in the playoffs. I'm so sick of Eagles fans. They have to be the most singularly annoying people on earth. To go back to Austin Powers, there's only 2 kinds of people in this world that I can't stand: people who are intolerant of other fan bases and Eagles fans. They are just out of this world annoying. When I lived in Uptown, that was like, this is going back years when the Eagles had beaten the Vikings, that one NFC title game, and then the Eagles played in the Super Bowl, and then they won it here. all night outside my uptown apartment, I was hearing these idiot drunk Eagle fans running up and down my street.
Fly, Eagles, fly.
Not many times in my life have I felt murder in my heart, but all that night at like 3 a.m. when I still couldn't go to bed, my grit teeth. I just, yeah. Anyway, I want the Eagles back in the playoffs. They're feeling themselves a little bit, but I think Kevin O'Connell's going to make some adjustments, and I think the next time we play them, it could be a different result.
I don't want to play them there, though. If the Vikings get the Eagles again, I'd rather have them here.
Do you guys watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia? Like every time we play against we're passionate fans. We hammer people. Like that's what we do. Like it's just everything about it is so great. I love that show. Before we die, Thor is going to be first on the episode. Like he's going to beat me in the studio room for this episode.
I'm the one who's always late. I see.
Wow.
Hey, what's the record? Let it be known, Ross. What's the record?
Letting people inside to what we deal with before the show. I think Jesse's been number one every time. She was so
just
early.
In life in general, but like
wait, what?
Yeah.
She was so early one time she had to leave and come back. That's how early she was.
Yeah, one time. I think the record will show I've been earlier more than Jesse.
Let the record show.
Yeah.
Record will show everything.
I'm just glad anytime Thor shows up. That's
you know what? We all.
Well, okay, fair enough. I am the diva of this show. That is what it is.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Visible, right?
I'm going to wear that crown.
Again, this is Before We Die, brought to you by Purple Daily and Score North. Subscribe, rate, check out all the Purple Daily content for your Vikings needs on YouTube, scorenorth.com. You love it. Drop some comments. Let us know what you guys are thinking. And again, be sure to check out all the other shows about all your Vikings needs. We'll see you guys on Thursday.
Skull.